Yeah, thank you, Chairman Capito, and good morning, Secretary McAleen and Undersecretary Fulgham. And I welcome you to the hearing on the DHS budget request for 2020. I want to thank you for taking on the new role as acting secretary. It is the toughest job in town, and please extend my appreciation to the 240,000 people who worked every day with the goal of keeping this country safe. We have seen a recent purge in officials serving in leadership positions at the department. DHS employees and American people deserve a Homeland Security Department with leaders they know won't be kicked out due to knee-jerk reactions or political decisions fueled by extreme ideologues. Nearly half of the department's leadership positions are filled with acting officials. And with all due respect to the dedicated officials that serve in those jobs, including yourselves, the vacuum of leadership at DHS that this creates will only serve to harm morale and, perhaps worse, leave us in a more vulnerable situation as a nation. With regard to the southern border, I recently visited the Rio Grande Valley to get a first-hand look at the increasingly desperate situation. I met with law enforcement, landowners, agriculture producers to discuss the challenges that they face and determine what resources that they need to secure the border in a safe, effective, and cost-effective way. We made significant progress in February, as the chairman pointed out, with the passage of the fiscal year 2019 DHS Appropriations Act. It provided an additional $414 million in humanitarian assistance, $564 million to procure counter-drug technology for our ports of entry, $100 million for border technology, $127 million for additional air and marine assets, and $600 million and funds for 600 additional customs officers. But as you stated in your testimony, the humanitarian situation on the border is rapidly overwhelming the ability of the federal government to respond. Just yesterday, we received an emergency supplemental totaling $4.5 billion, of which $1.1 billion is requested for DHS. We want to hear more about that request as we move forward today. We also can't lose sight of the fact that the DHS is made up of 14 major components, all with a mission to protect this country, land, air, sea, and cyberspace. But under this administration, an expensive taxpayer-funded wall and immigration process dominates the conversation and resources. Cybersecurity, for instance, is a growing threat. We all agree with that, and the new battleground for many nations that want to do us harm. Domestic terrorism arrests are on the rise. Terrorists continue to find new ways to target aviation. Strategic requirements in Arctic require additional Coast Guard resources. And communities need to be more resilient through investments in mitigation. Unfortunately, the department's fiscal year 2020 budget request would only increase funding for border security and immigration enforcement by 20%, while cutting funds for the rest of the department by 8%. This creates an unfortunate imbalance. The request for the border wall alone represents 10% of the total DHS budget, a wall that will not address the complexity of the humanitarian crisis that is occurring on our border today. The budget eliminates TSA Viper teams and ends funding for law enforcement support. The Coast Guard's capital budget would be cut by $1 billion. Cybersecurity funding is flat despite a red blinking light warning from the Director of National Intelligence. The Science and Technology Directorate's R&D funding would be cut by 40%. Making it harder to develop technologies to stay ahead of terrorist groups. FEMA preparedness grants and state and local training would be reduced by 20%, even though these threats are more diverse than ever. And finally, the budget relies on a faulty assumption that an unauthorized increase in aviation security fees will be enacted to offset $600 million in budget authority. Again, all of this while the administration wants to spend another $8.6 billion on a wall that is not going to help the evolving humanitarian crisis on the southern border. Look, I look forward to discussing some of these issues with you today. Finally, on the matter that is very important to Montana, I want to thank the CBP for a quick response and work with me to cut through the bureaucracy to ensure that uninterrupted import of hemp seeds for American growers will be available this planting season, which was intended by our recently passed Farm Bill. I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary, for appearing for this committee. I want to thank you for your commitment to the security of this country. I think you're a good man. We need to make sure you have the resources in the right places for you to be able to do your job. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although I will tell you, I think the previous chairman was much better looking than you, but
I would tend to agree with you.
Absolutely, I thought you might. Look, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate you being here once again, both of you. On March 28th, your predecessor, Secretary Nielsen, sent Congress a letter requesting immediate assistance from Congress. There were no details provided on specifics. Yesterday, we were sent a supplemental $4.5 billion. You talked about in your opening statement, $1.1 billion for DHS with that request is an additional $400 million within that $1.1 billion for humanitarian activities. This is on top of $414 million that Congress provided just 2.5 months ago for humanitarian support. So can you tell me how much of that $414 million that was provided 2.5 months ago has been spent?
Over $225 million have been spent by CBP on humanitarian missions so far this fiscal year. A lot of that is increasing right now as they've established some soft-sided processing facilities in El Paso and Donna, and will grow as they apply additional funding to the medical contract to extend professional medical care to additional stations and sectors along the border. And of course, a lot of it is for food and care and processing, so that's spent on a monthly basis as additional families and children come through the system.
So quick math, that leaves about $180 million of that on top of this. So you need $580 million to get to the end of the fiscal year at current rates?
It's identified for spending, but yes, we're still in the middle of the fiscal year, so that will be spent as we continue on.
How does this impact the budget for 2020? Because we're increasing it pretty significantly.
Sure. So the budget for 2020, again, was submitted while we were still addressing the rising conditions and requirements at the border for family and humanitarian care. So it's a little bit in between in terms of the timing. What the supplemental does is kind of rationalizes the 19, 20,
there was a number that came from the President's office on humanitarian aid. Does that number need to be increased?
Yes, by the amount in the supplemental.
Okay, but not more than that for 2020?
Correct.
Okay. The department has received $242 million of a total of a $601 million anticipated from the Treasury Forestry Fund for wall construction. They took $242 million from the Forestry Fund for wall construction. This is part of the President's end run around the legislative process. It didn't get what he wanted in a bipartisan conference committee. I would argue that these dollars should be the first dollars out when used, particularly when you're asking for a supplemental, the first dollars out for humanitarian crisis. If you want to respond to that, you can. But I just think it's kind of crazy that there's a significant sum of money there that could be utilized for that right now with just the transfer authority.
Thank you, Senator. I would just offer that we're trying to apply all available sources of funding to both the border security and the humanitarian crisis we're facing.
So during FY 2018, DHS appropriations included a requirement that DHS submit a risk-based plan for improving border security. It mandated the plan address several elements, including detailed implementation schedule with estimates for planning future obligations and identification of planned location, quantities, and types of resources such as fencing and technology, description of the methodology analysis used for select resources for deployment, to include analysis of alternatives, staffing requirements, performance metrics, and I am concerned about the extent to which DHS 218 plan fails to address these elements. It does not include alternative analysis, comparing technology to physical barriers, including cost and performance trade-offs. It does not include information on the effects of infrastructure deployment on communities and property owners. And by the way, you well know I was on the border. I met with some of those property owners. I have incredible concerns. I would be going crazy if this happened on my farm. And there are no details on environmental impacts of border barriers as required by the legislation. First, I would hope you would commit to completing those requirements. Is that a possibility?
That is absolutely something we want to work with the committee and your team on. We've improved the report from 17 to 18. We'll improve it from 18 to 19. And I can go through some of the elements you raised and how we're addressing it.
Let's just get to the one that's the most important one, because this is where most of the money is going to be going. Technology's come a long way over the last decade. I met with tech companies that have sat in my office and believes they can do a much better job than a physical barrier with technology, and a technology that can be changed, by the way, as per how the threat changes to our border, at a much cheaper, and I'm talking much cheaper. You've got the numbers, you know. It's literally pennies on the dollar. And I believe that a comprehensive and independent study of that needs to be completed before we spend $25 billion on a fiscal barrier. I just got to tell you that I've been in a lot of cases. I was on a school board once when people were doing stuff that just didn't seem right, and I was talking and nobody would listen. And guess what? A few years later, they found out that I was right. I'm not saying I'm absolutely right here, but if we don't do the study, we don't know. So can I get any sort of commitment that we'll get this study done before we start dropping billions of dollars on a wall that's a wall that's a wall that's a wall? As a former governor of Montana once said, build a 30-foot wall, they'll buy a 35-foot ladder.
Thank you, Senator. I can assure you, first of all, we're listening. I'm listening to you as well as the leadership of CBP and your concerns, and we'll be responding throughout the process. There has been significant analysis of alternatives that are embedded in the requirements that are submitted in the Border Security Improvement Plan. We're not asking for wall in all areas of the border. In many areas, the technology you outlined, and really we appreciate this committee's support for innovative technology development, which is going to allow us to extend our surveillance capability at cheaper prices than anticipated, with greater effect over the developments the last several years. For the wall itself, though, we're asking for that in areas not just so that we can identify traffic, but that we can stop it and control it and get our agents to the interdiction point. So
I got it.
Comes from the secretaries on the ground.
I'm way over time, but I will tell you this. When we talk about drugs, I told you this yesterday, when we talk about drugs, I can see it. I can see it. There's probably a benefit as long as we have the technology at the ports. We're talking immigration. I think we are creating problems here that we're going to regret. And I do not envy those farmers. Land that's worth $65,000 to $75,000 an acre, incredibly high value river bottom land, they're going to lose their land. And my guess is we're not going to pay them $65,000, $75,000. I don't see how we get it through Congress to do that. And so they're just going to be SOL. So, and it doesn't solve the problem. Let's talk about removing forage from the riverbank. Let's talk about putting technology up to give your guys, your folks on the border, a chance to be able to interdict these folks. And so that they know when they come across the border, they're not going to have 1.1 million acres to be able to set foot on and claim asylum or whatever else they want to claim. I'll be back, but thank you.
Thank you.